Farkas.
That's right.
Sorry about that. Well, Frank, I want to just dive right into this first question because it's a short session and both committees will be starting with the issue of the proposed budget from Governor Bob Ferguson, and he is proposing to spend about $3 billion more, put about $3 billion more into the transportation system over the next decade. And to raise the money, he wants to do something that you folks did not do last session. He wants to tap in and to that revenue stream of the new gas tax and the higher fees that you passed. He wants to bond, sell bonds and pay off with that money. So you didn't do that last session. Will you do it this session? So starting with Senator King, I just wondered if is that the path the legislature should go and spending that? So you didn't do that last session. Will you do it this session? So starting with Senator King, I just wondered if is that the path the legislature should go and spending that money to preserve roads, maintain bridges, and build new ferries? That's what the governor wants?
I could give you an easy answer, and that would be no. But it doesn't seem to be the logical place that we should be looking at raising money to pay for maintenance and preservation by bonding. As someone said, and I don't remember who, but it's like, we're going to be, all of the things that you do with maintenance and preservation will be used up and gone by the time we pay off the bonds. And so I think we got to look at other ways of trying to accommodate that. Doesn't mean that we don't have a problem with maintenance and preservation. We all know that we do, but I don't think bonding is the way to get there.
Yeah, I think there's sort of two things I'm thinking about when it comes to our preservation needs. The first is when we look at the jobs report that was released today in DC, we see that the jobs picture in the U.S. is weakening. We know in Washington State from our Revenue Forecast Council that 2025 saw very little job growth, and 2026 potentially will be flat. So one of the things we can do to create jobs in the short term is more highway preservation. Economists tell us that every $1 billion in highway maintenance and preservation is, between 10 and 20,000 jobs. So the economy right now in Washington could use this. I think we need to be putting more into preservation and maintenance. I agree with Senator King that we should only bond for things that are going to last longer than the bond period. We know that 10% of Washington's bridges are over 80 years old. So if the governor's proposal is to use bonded funds to replace some of the very old bridges that we have seen fail us in the last year, then I think there may be value in taking a look at that. But bonding to pay for more routine pavement maintenance that's not going to last for 30 years, I don't suspect the governor supports that either, but I think we do need to be careful about what we're buying with it. At the high level, though, whether it's buying new ferry vessels, replacing those aging bridges, or just doing a better job of maintenance and upkeep on our highways, it's clear that we have to rededicate ourselves to preservation and maintenance.
So the bonding proposal is in the context of what else we've done, and in particular the revenues that we raised last session. To be clear, I believe the Senate did pass a bonding bill last session, and we chose on the House side, Representative Farkas and I agreed that that was not the time to be doing that, especially when you consider the other needs that are out there in terms of culverts. There's mediation going on right now with respect to culverts. There is a lot of projects that have been dating back to 2015 that are not yet complete. And we did work in the House to identify where we were with respect to the capital needs on the ferry system, and there's other needs for that we don't have the resources for in a few years from now. So it's a little early to be talking about bonding, but what I would say is this: no doubt, the legislature has failed to provide enough resources for preservation and maintenance. We need to find a way to do that. And we do need to address the ferry system, but like what we found with our road projects, we're getting cost escalations. Things are costing a lot more. We're into territory that is new for us. And so I think caution, the yellow light, which hasn't come on yet, I think has to be considered. But we will hear the governor's office out on their proposal and make sure we understand what the request is.
Well, good morning, everybody. Thanks for being here on a beautiful Friday morning. My answer, along with Senator King, no. Appreciate the governor's newfound interest in maintenance and preservation, and I'm glad that he is looking at all the things that we need to do. I agree with my colleagues here. I disagree a little bit that we failed. I think we've done an incredible job here, especially in the budget work that the four of us have done in the last several years on putting forth dollars for maintenance and preservation. I think it really does come down to priorities and what have the priorities been over the last 20 years. And maybe maintenance and preservation just wasn't at that high level that it should have been. So I'm glad that we're taking a harder look at that. But I think that if we're going to address maintenance and preservation, we need to look at existing revenues. You're going to hear me all session long talk about the use of Climate Commitment Act. I know that goes contrary to some of my colleagues on this panel this morning, but I think that we need to, and the people of Washington State would agree with us, that we need to start putting some of those existing resources before we further the responsibility and the debt load for the people of Washington State. We currently carry about a $1.8 billion, if not more, debt load on the current bonding that we have in the state, and I agree that we need to reserve that capacity for the bigger issues of the growth that we're going to need to do in infrastructure over the next many years.
Okay, before I ask my second question, I'll alert everyone after this one. We'll open it up and take questions from the audience. There is a TVW person who will have a mic, so if you do get called on, just give them a moment to reach you so you'll be heard for the audience. In the area of money and in immediate needs, the terrible storms in December, there's a lot of damage to the infrastructure. Money will be needed now and in very short term before any federal aid might even arrive. So talk a little about how is the state and the legislature going to deal with those costs in this session? And does it or will it impact the project lists that are out there? Will anything be delayed, improvements put back because we need to deal with the emergency of the storm damage right now? And I'll start on this end with Representative Farkas.
Thanks, Jerry. First of all, I just want to say what a fantastic job that WashDOT is doing right now. The crews are out there as we speak all over the state, hustling and working in tough conditions to put our roads back together, especially along Highway 2 and many other areas in the state of Washington, so a big shout out to them. Of course, we're going to have to look at it. We're going to see probably a list in all of the aspects of the damages that were done to the infrastructure throughout Washington State. Cost estimates will be put forth by WashDOT. We will have to look at that for immediate need right now. But again, I will say that until we get some indication that we're going to receive federal funds, which I'm sure we will at some point, that we can backfill, we do have resources to use. I've already proposed and dropped a bill to allocate Climate Commitment Act money, that extra surplus Climate Commitment Act money that was received over and above what was originally anticipated for the state of Washington in this last year, about $690 million, to be able to use those funds for emergency, as this was a climate-related issue with this storm that hit here in December. So I think that we will have to have conversations before we start looking at moving projects or canceling different things to reprioritize some of the spending that we're going to do in this supplemental budget.
I appreciate the question, and I had occasion to talk to one of the regional administrators, and it's going to be a while till we know what the full costs are. But for instance, in the Olympic region, they really have only one project that is a big concern in terms of that will have some serious expenses to it. That's not true in other parts of the state, but if you look at the governor's proposal, there was quite a bit of underspend so far, and I think that we can float and make sure that, as a priority, make sure that the governor has the money he needs to be able to address things. And, we're talking about, on a normal situation, an 85 to 90% reimbursement by the feds of the major costs here. So it's not like we're and I think it's good to presume that that's going to happen. And so we should do that. But I would, again, also indicate my appreciation for the work that it's not just during the storms, it's every day. It's that we have great people who are out there working hard to make sure that roads are safe and that people can get to where they need to get. And they've done an excellent job in very adverse circumstances.
Yeah, I think I agree with a lot of the comments that my colleagues have said. I also want to, in addition to WashDOT and the incredible work that they've done, Secretary Meredith has done, I also want to thank the governor. He's been to Snohomish County multiple times to visit the flood-damaged areas, and I know that he's been paying a lot of attention to this as well. In addition to making sure that we're getting a sense of what the costs for the State Department of Transportation are, as we toured the flood damage, there's a lot of county and city infrastructure that was also damaged. So I've asked our local government partners to help give a sense of what the total costs of damage have been for them. I think we need to make sure, for the residents in rural parts of Snohomish County, it's not just Highway 2 that they depend on to get their products to market or get folks to where they need to go. It's also our mostly our county roads, but in some cases, city infrastructure as well. So I want to make sure that the entire system is recovering. And I am worried because the federal reimbursement often tends to take a long amount of time. And for our smaller jurisdictions, unfortunately, a city and in some cases our rural counties can't float millions of dollars while we wait for federal reimbursement. So I think we need to take a holistic look at this. I sort of disagree on the funding source, likely not a surprise. We did, increase the gas tax in July for the reason that we need to invest more in preservation and maintenance and resilience. So I think we have additional resources coming on board. The revenue projections show that gas tax increase is delivering resources for our budget. So I would like to look at that as a source for maintenance and preservation and recovery efforts. I think we told Washingtonians that as we're paying more at the pump, it's going to be immediately invested back into making our system stronger and more resilient. I think this is the moment to sort of put our money where our mouth is and show that we're going to invest those dollars to help recover from these disasters and make our infrastructure more resilient as we move forward.
Well, I don't have a whole lot to add there, but I agree with a lot of what has been said. We have to have some numbers so we know how drastic this is going to be and how we need to respond. And I agree with my good chair that, we did pass a gas tax and we do have those monies available and they are coming in. And I would be remiss. I drove across Snoqualmie Pass yesterday morning. It was probably about 6:30 or 7 o'clock. It was somewhat still dark out, and I can tell you there were crews going both directions, 3 trucks. I mean, what I thought was going to be 10 to 12 inches of snow, the roads were absolutely great. And they were doing an absolutely fabulous job and have always done a fabulous job on keeping that pass open as best as they can, other than what's caused by the drivers that tend to want to go a little faster than they should be going. And then as I was driving over, obviously I went under Bullfrog, the overpass that was damaged a month or 2 ago. They got rails that need to be put up, and I think within a week and a half, that project is going to be done. And it's utterly amazing what can be done when there's an emergency. And the point I'd like to make is, if we can do this when you have an emergency, why in the world does it take us forever to do a project? We ought to consider every project an emergency, and it would be done timely, efficiently, effectively, and probably at a much less cost. That's just my comment for that. But Getting back to the question, I need to see the numbers. I need to see how big it is. We need to find out how long it's going to take for the feds to come through with hopefully what they're going to help us with. But we obviously have a long way to go with that flood damage and storm damage. But the four of us will sit down and look at that and figure out how we're going to address it. I can assure you that. So thank you.
Okay, we're going to take a couple questions, and I don't think going forward, all four of you have to answer every question if it's not necessary, but I wanted to hear your voices to get you started this morning on everything. Let's start with Mitchell. And Tim.
Senator Elias, during the last session, there was concern that the state may not have enough existing revenue to kind of continue some of the ongoing projects, specifically the North Spokane corridor. At the end of the session, the state increased the gas tax by approximately 6 cents. I was just wondering, going forward, if you anticipate any other kind of challenges with funding, or if you anticipate these projects to continue uninterrupted.
Yeah, with respect to the North Spokane corridor, you know, our initial budget projection when we wrote an all cuts budget, and then we had a budget that showed what the revenue could pay for. The all cuts budget did show that we wouldn't be able to complete all those phases. So when we made the decision together, bipartisan, bicameral, to move forward, it does include full funding for North Spokane. That project is on track. We are going to finish it. I think as we move forward, the real question is how do we adequately fund preservation and maintenance? The department tells us in round terms, I think we need about $1 billion a year in additional funding for preservation and maintenance. We don't have that fully identified. I think that's the discussion we need to begin. I also appreciate Representative Barkas reminding us that we have made substantial investments, and Chair Fye and I in Move Ahead put $3 billion more towards preservation and maintenance. Those funds are beginning to come online. I think we have agreement that the new resources from the gas tax should largely go to preservation and maintenance. I think this session we can start to lay out what that looks like. But we are going to finish the job on important projects like 520, the Columbia River Bridge, North Spokane corridor. We are going to get the job done on those, and the budget we passed last year puts us in a strong position to get those projects done.
When we passed the budget, the primary objective, because of the cost increases that we had, 520 being the biggest example of $700 million over original estimate. I know I think all of us agree that we made commitments in 2015 to a number of projects, the North-South Spokane Freeway being one of them, and I understand that some bids will be coming in shortly on that. What we don't know is what kind of bids we're going to get. So I would say it would be hard to justify taking money from preservation and maintenance to fill the hole of, if we get cost increases on projects. What it probably will mean is that we're going to have to look at the schedule of the remaining projects about when they can be delivered, because we do need to make sure that we don't continue to dip into preservation and maintenance funds in order to fund projects. We just have to set different expectations about when people will have newer projects, about when those can get delivered.
I would just add that, yes, we have this gas tax, and we put in play. When we work at the budget, we don't just look at 1 year. We look at, of course, the biennial budget, the 2 years. But we've actually put into practice, the chair and I, looking at 6 years, 8 years. So we're projecting out as far as we can to take into consideration. Over the last several years, we've seen incredible cost increases on major projects, 520, 405, to name a few, 167. Highway 18 project doubled in cost. Will that happen in the future? Costs are going up. We anticipate that. We try to anticipate that in the budgeting work. I don't see us pulling from, we're going to keep saying maintenance and preservation. I don't see us doing that, but I am going to repeat that we should look at using other existing resources and reprioritizing the use of those dollars so that we do not pull from existing projects. We have the revenue from the gas tax to handle any increases in costs in the future, because remember, the gas tax is indexed. So the gas tax is going to go up every year in July, indexed to inflation. So it is going to increase even to offset some of the decline. But we should look at those existing resources so we don't do that. So we can do both, right? So keeping that project on task and keeping to our commitments, as the chair said, is a top priority for all of us up here. And I'm sure we'll continue to do that.
Simone? The second row.
Senator Elias, earlier on you mentioned aging bridges, and Tacoma Narrows Bridge is among the bridges that is currently deteriorating. Could you expand a bit on where bridges fall in terms of the list of maintenance and preservation needs?
Obviously, we care about all of our infrastructure. Our ferries are also aging rapidly. So to me, I think when we look at the dollar cost for projects, bridges and ferries are kind of the projects that there's a lot of cost to make sure that those are replaced when they need to be replaced. All of our systems, our pavement conditions in other parts of the state are also in challenging positions. But I think it just illustrates part of the challenge. So the department, and we had a presentation at our work session during committee days on the DOT's overall preservation program. So obviously our pavement and our bridges are important components of that. I just highlight the data though on bridges because when 10% of our bridges are over 80 years old, you know, we can do all the work we can to keep those in good condition, but you reach a point where you have to just replace those structures. They're not intended to last, you know, for centuries. And so I think it's an indicator of, it's one of those warning lights on the system that we've got to do a better job of. I think for Tacoma Narrows, you know, there's unique situations there because of how we finance the replacement of, you know, one of those spans. And I think we need to have a conversation about does the tolling continue to pay for maintenance and preservation of the whole facility, or how do we fund the replacement of that other span across time? That's a little bit more complicated than other bridge projects in the system. But our ferries and our bridges, you know, have to be replaced on some schedule. They're very expensive when we do. That's part of why we've got to stay ahead of preservation and maintenance. And I will just because Representative Barkas is right that the gas tax is indexed. It's not indexed to inflation, though. It is a 2% increase from year to year. And I know he didn't mean to say that, but I just want, for those of you that weren't following our discussion last year, it's 2% that's more tracked to fuel efficiency improvements across the fleet over time. But the gas tax will go up at that 2% level from year to year. Just want to make sure we got that detail.
Since you asked about the Narrows Bridge, and it's at the edge of my district, and as Senator Elias indicated, the one span is covered by the users of the system, largely through the tolls that are charged. The other bridge is not, and I think I've heard numbers. If you did a full fix of that bridge, which I don't know you need to do every piece of this right away, I think it's something on the order of $150 million. But of course, it is very important to not only my district, but a lot of other folks, just like other bridges are so important. So because of the environment that we're here in the good state of Washington, we have lots of bridges and we need to make investments. And I would hope that we would set it up so that we target bridges and have, so that citizens know which bridges are going to get fixed and when.
Thanks for the question. There's no more glaring example of the, I don't know if I want to use the word failure, but problem than the Fairfax Bridge. Highway 165 on Carbon River, Wilkeson. I just was up there here not too long ago. I know Chair Faya has been up there. We do need to take a look at these bridges. And it's interesting that I keep hearing that the legislature has not done an adequate job in funding to do this. And I think part of the problem is getting that information to the legislature so that we know what is the priority, what is the pick list that needs to be done, what are the bridges that are most critical, and where is the money that, you know, what are the needs of that? There is going to be legislation. I'm working on some stuff with some of my colleagues to work with WashDOT to be able to provide us a better understanding of dollars as part of that maintenance and preservation package specifically for bridges, right? So we do not ever see another situation like the Wilkeson Bridge, where for 20 years it was not maintained, hadn't been painted, weight restrictions year after year to a final closure in April, and now you have residents stranded on the other side of that. That is a priority for me. I think it should be a priority for the legislature to get that bridge replaced. However, there are so many other bridges, from the Narrows Bridge to the Swing Bridge in Aberdeen to the Hood River Bridge to you name it. There are so many things that we need to be doing. So again, it's a broader conversation. We're ready to do that as far as how we look at that from appropriations in the budget. But I think it will be working with WashDOT at a much higher level to find out what those priorities are and how we're going to do that. And I'll also just add that we need to do it in an expedited way. We must look at some of these as an emergency situation, like the Wilkinson Bridge or the Fairfax Bridge, and not go into a situation where we're looking at 8 to 10 years to replace critical infrastructure.
So I agree with most of what's been said here. I'm not familiar enough with the Tacoma Narrow Bridge to comment on that, but I would say I agree with Representative Chairman Fye as that, you know, we need a good list of what are the bridges. We need to look at, you know, put them in some kind of order of prioritization, look at, you know, how much money is it going to take if we did all of them. We need to look at perhaps, I think it was somewhere in maybe the state of Pennsylvania that bundled like 500 bridges and put them out for bid. And, you know, we have to kind of start to think out of the box of what we got to do to address this issue. The other thing I would say is we have to get real about the regulations and the requirements that we put on every time we want to fix one of these bridges or build or replace a bridge. It's like, well, you can't get in the water because of this period of time, and yet you can have rain and snow and hail and at the same time that brings down trees and branches. I mean, much more disruptive than what you would see if you were doing construction on one part of a river, as an example. You don't span the whole river with the project. You do part of it at a time. I mean, there's been studies that show, you know, these fish that we keep trying to save that are going around this, you know, they're not stupid. They figure it out. They know there's a way, and they go around it. We have to get real about what we're doing and what we require, because it's expensive, and it's not only expensive, it takes time. And time is not one of our friends, because we all know that if we delay for a year because you couldn't get in the water at this certain time, then you delay it for a year. It's another 10, 12, 15% to the cost of that. So we have to, one, prioritize. We need a good list, but it's a list that just goes along with all of our roads, you know, all of the other things that we have to look at. But we do need to look at that and prioritize it.
Okay, we'll do Carlene and then John. Wait a second, wait till, we want everyone to hear you.
Loud enough. Carlene Johnson with the Center Square. I'd be interested to find out, Senator Elias or Representative Fye, if you would be open to Rep. Barkas's suggestion that some CCA funding could be shifted over. And you mentioned, Senator Elias, no, but we did find out this week, I'm sure you're aware, that Ecology's numbers were data entry errors, so that the efficacy of those projects for emissions reductions are not nearly what they had been stated. So given we do have all these emergent needs, critical infrastructure, why not at least temporarily move some of that money over? Because ultimately, if you're helping people move and goods move, you are impacting the environment perhaps more effectively than some of the spending that CCA has implemented.
Yeah, I think, you know, when we passed the Climate Commitment Act a few years ago, the goal is to reduce the state's emissions. That's the purpose of that policy. So I think, you know, certainly in my time as chair, our focus has been on how do we reduce emissions in the transportation sector, and that should be the focus for these funds moving forward. You know, I shared in previous interviews that once the damage is done, you know, the opportunity to prevent the climate catastrophe to begin with sort of has passed us. So I don't think that fixing infrastructure that was damaged because of climate change is the most appropriate use for these funds when we can invest to get out in front of it. And I think Chair Fye and I have really focused on particularly making sure that our fleets have the resources they need to convert to clean fuels. That's what's going to improve air quality. Both Chair Fye and I have overburdened communities in our districts, and we've got to figure out a way not just to reduce climate emissions, but also a way to make sure that the kids in our elementary schools near airports or near the port aren't breathing dirty air. And those fleet incentives, the work we're doing to help Washingtonians convert to electric vehicles, and then the funding we're doing to expand access to transit and other safe, low-carbon transportation options. To me, that's the place where it makes sense to invest these CCA dollars. The beauty of this budget, though, is we work in a bipartisan way. So I don't agree with Representative Barkas on this, but we're going to sit at the table and keep talking until we figure out a way to pass a budget. Usually they say in the legislature the goal is 25, 50, and 1. Here in the Senate, our goal isn't 25 on the budget. Our goal is 45 on the budget. We want to make sure this is solidly bipartisan. Senator King and I disagree on some things, and then we sit in rooms long enough until we find a path forward that we can both live with. We're going to do that on this issue. We're going to do that on every issue. Right now, we're in disagreement, but we'll keep talking.
So thanks for the question. Back when we passed the CCA, as the bill came over from the Senate, I was concerned that if we were truly going to do the job that the public expects us to do with related to emissions, if we were going to raise revenue in doing so, that we needed to make sure that that's where the money got spent and not on, like the constitutional amendment for highways, not spent on more additional roadway. And that is actually in the statute, is that it can't be spent for highways. So in our work, which I don't know whether the other budgets do, you have to ask them about it, but we specifically set up an evaluation mechanism. So those people who receive money from our programs have to report to us about not what they suspected they would get in terms of carbon emissions, but what actually occurred, so that if we see something isn't working, we move the money to place where it is. And here's the other part. One of our biggest expenditures that we agreed in when we did the 2022 package was the electrification of the ferries. That extra cost comes from CCA dollars. If it hadn't been for that, then we'd be paying for that, and it could be paid for out of the other resources that we have absent CCA. So very important things that help build out the system and provide for new ferries. But I think it's sort of a question in my mind. Do you fight over the size of the pie, or do you add to the pie? And I think it's more of a case in the work that we did this last session is to add to the pie.
Well, thank you for the question, and we are going to disagree on this one in a spirited way, of course. So much to unpack with the comments from my colleagues today. Senator Lee has made a good comment about paying more at the pump, and that we told the people we would reinvest. You're paying more at the pump with the CCA, about $1 something a gallon. So let's just put that on the table. Ferries, I think we're going to have a broader conversation of whether we actually should electrify the ferry boat fleet. That will be a conversation that will be had this session and moving forward as we're seeing the incredible cost to build out that infrastructure, some of the early failures of the early hybrid, and if we're actually going to get ferry boats in the water anytime soon. We do invest the Climate Commitment Act in a myriad of good ways to help our environment, and there is a commitment to do that. And I appreciate Chair Fye's steadfast commitment to make sure that we're not going back on the word when they passed that bill. I was not in favor of it, but when they did, they committed that dollars would go to that. However, I just heard here recently that Governor Ferguson, in his proposal to fix the incredible hole in the operating budget, there's a little piece in there that says that about $800 million of CCA money could be used for the working families tax credit. I'm not quite sure how that relates to climate. So there are some other things, and you're going to see that dollars that are coming in for the CCA, especially the overages, that we had an incredible year of money coming in through that program, and there isn't a surplus. And I even think the dollar was even higher than 600 or 700 million, a recent report that I saw. There will be a lot of scrambling between the operating budget, and transportation, and others to utilize those funds. And maybe they'll be reconsidered that maybe at this time, as somebody had said, temporarily, those funds might be used for other things besides just the programs that have been put in place. I'll again say this. I think we need to reevaluate the spending, even on the CCA, in all aspects of it, and prioritization, to find out if it is the highest and best use to improve our climate using these taxpayer dollars, right? I really believe that that is something that should be a conversation. That's why we're having a conversation about the ferry boats with my colleagues on both sides of the aisle, whether is this the best reduction of carbon, is this the best use of those dollars? We're going to need to do that when we look at the entirety of this budget, not just for this supplemental cycle, but moving forward.
Front row, John?
Hey, can I comment on that, please?
Oh,
Sorry.
sorry.
I know I'm sitting over here sleeping, but I woke up. So I appreciate your comment about the report of the data that had to do with how much or how large the emissions were. I got to say, I think you were being extremely polite. When you have a report that's 80% off, it seems to me that it's a little more than just a data error, but I'll leave it at that. I would say, I think there's, when CCA was passed, and I believe I understand what was trying to be achieved, but to say you can't use it for roads or bridges or highways or that, there are ways that if we use that money wisely, we could reduce emissions on our roads and in bridges. And, a reduction in emissions is a reduction in emissions. And if we have a road system that gets people from one place to another quicker and safer, that's going to reduce our emissions. It's the same as if you had a bridge go down and the people that use that bridge on a regular basis now have to travel 60 miles further. If you fix that bridge, you then have taken away that 60 miles. That's a reduction in emissions. It's to the degree that you want to define it here. That's the problem that we have, in my opinion. And it goes back. These guys have heard me say this, and I know they know I'm going to say it anyway. Hood River Bridge, we're going to add a bike and ped path. They tell me, oh, that's just part of the bridge. Well, we're going to build a ferry. But we're going to pay for the batteries. Well, isn't that just part of the bridge or part of the ferry? Putting a bike and ped path, a new one on a bridge, reduces emissions, has the opportunity to reduce emissions because of everybody that can walk or ride a bike across that bridge. That's a reduction. It may be called roads, bridges, or highways, but it's still a reduction, and it needs to be recognized as that. Thank you.
Now we'll go to John in the front row.
I've got about
One question is what you got.
one multiple part question.
We will,
All of these pertain to the CCA issue that you've been discussing here. One wanted to get the other's reply to Senator King's just last comment. Also on transfer, how much CCA money is currently allocated for the electrification of ferries? How much more do you need? How much more are you seeking? And what do you hope to accomplish in speeding up electrification by 1 or 2 years with the transfer if you do transfer the CCA money?
On the Hood River Bridge, we're committed to replacing the Hood River Bridge. We funded our portion of replacing the Hood River Bridge. So Senator King knows I'm committed to getting that project done. We don't need to use CCA funds because we found other funds, and we're committed to getting that work done. We're also excited the federal government is coming on board with a commitment there. In terms of the amount of funding from the Climate Commitment Act that goes to ferries, if you'd asked me on Sine Die, I remembered we're like 3 days before session, so my memory banks are purged on those details. We can follow up with these specific amounts, but it's roughly 25% of the cost of those new ferries because that's the incremental cost of electrifying them. But in terms of exactly what that number, maybe Chair Fry remembers, I don't remember exactly, but a couple $100 million certainly is what we're investing in. In terms of speeding up electrification, what we're now doing is constructing the vessels and then making sure the shore power infrastructure is there as the vessels arrive for them to be able to use their hybrid capabilities. So we're not trying to speed that up. I wish we could speed up the delivery of those vessels. We are sort of where we are in terms of when they arrive. I just want to make sure that the shore power is ready for them when they get here, that we can charge them on their runs. That's the current work in ferries using Climate Commitment Act funds.
Speeding it up, what do you need the extra money for?
Oh, so
I don't know what extra money.
Yeah, thanks for the lead in. So my memory is great, but not much better than yours on the exact amount. But I'll tell you, the other part is that the terminal electrification, right, at each terminal, that's 100% paid for by CCA money. In addition, as Senator Leas is correct, 25% of the cost, that was the WashDOT estimate for the ferries. For every new ferry, it's 25%. And on the conversions, the part of the cost that was related, because other work was done on that one ferry, the part that was related to fixing up and putting in the newer system for propulsion, 100% of that was paid for out of CCA dollars. So like I said earlier, it's a lot of commitment of CCA dollars into the ferry system that otherwise arguably could be borne by other sources of fund. With respect, I just can't resist this. So clearly, the Hood River Bridge, it might have been fully covered, but I understand that the estimate and the cost went from 500 million to $1 billion. So I think we're not fully funded on the Hood River Bridge at this point, unless some money's come in recently that I don't know about.
Does anyone want to talk about, just straight out, ready to stop the electrification program? Does a decision need to be made that the time frame for that has to be altered? Regardless of how it's funded, it seems to be already behind,
like
way
Jeopardy.
behind schedule.
It's kind of like ringing in for Jeopardy. I got it. Okay. Yes, thank you, Jerry. Good question. Time is of the essence. I will refrain from using any puns. Transportation puns come very easy, like ship sailing and things like that. We have to take a hard look at this. We had a meeting in June in Seattle, the House Transportation Commission with ferries. And during that meeting, we talked about a plan that was put in place many years ago about the electrification. The cost has changed dramatically. And where are those funds coming from, whether it's CCA or otherwise, but what is it going to cost to build out the entire electrification system for the ferries? Right now, one route, just for the one hybrid that we have in place, it is actually sailing part-time on the waters. That is around 150 million, I think was the number that was told, 150 million, 200 million, something like that. We also have to think about where we're going to get the power to do that, right? So I think that this procurement process was a new process for the state, going out of state. We do still have shipbuilders here in the state of Washington that are more than capable. I think that we should have had a broader conversation about the type of boats that we were building to begin with. This all changed in 2018 when the governor changed the course of action on that and decided to electrify the fleet. I think that we should really take a hard look at the procurement process right now, this builder that's building it, the concerns that are already being brought forth on the actual delivery of the boats that are in order, the timing of that over the next 4 to 5 years, and maybe, just maybe, we should go back to the drawing board and look at what we currently have built in diesel electric. If we would have considered that path, we would have reduced our emissions probably 50% or more using new technology, and we would have reduced the cost overall on building these boats from what they are. And these are not just speculation. This is data that we have seen. The original boats that we looked at when I first started working on this were about 140 to 160 million. Now you're approaching $500 million per copy. The conversion of the Wenatchee was how many millions of dollars? Over 96 million, something like that, or the total amount on that. So if you want to talk about how we build the Hood River Bridge and take care of other bridges and everything else, you look at the cost of one aspect of doing the ferry boats, electrification, doing them not electrification, what savings of money will you have, and where can you reappropriate that money in the future or reprioritize that money? So stay tuned. I'm going to be talking about this. I've actually reached out to the governor's office. I'd love to sit down with him and talk about the various plans. I'm pleased with the decision he made to pause the conversion of the other two right now to give us a little bit of time to think about that. And I think that in a bipartisan way, we really need to have a broad conversation on this.
Really, Representative Fye?
Yes.
Okay.
So I just want to go back to what I mentioned earlier about looking at the ferry system and all their capital needs. I think this is a broader question than whether you go with hybrid electric ferries or whether you go to more traditional propulsion systems. There is a lot of planned needs that the ferry system has put forward. We got to make some choices because we can't afford it all. This is even before talking about 3 new ferries. So it's in a broader context, right? One of the decisions is, do we say are the benefits worth it on electrification or not? Are the carbon savings and health savings, air quality savings worth it or not? That's just one of the questions. There are other questions. There's been conversation about whether to go to passenger-only ferries. There's been discussion about the electrification at the terminals and the sequencing of those things. There's a lot of issues out there that would be best resolved in a comprehensive way, rather than dealing it ad hoc each legislative session about what are we going to do. There's a proposal about leasing vessels. There's proposals about using hydrogen at the San Juan ferry system area. So there's all these different options we have, and we need to sort through that and make a collective decision with the governor about what are the best investments and when should we do them.
Okay, I want to ask just the last couple of questions before we run out of time. I'm going to limit the answers if I can. This one is for Senator Elias. I think might be the only one I need to answer on that, but is this the year the state legislature lowers the blood alcohol level, the legal limit for drunk driving?
Well, I appreciate you asking about traffic safety, because I wanted to make sure that we included that. And I think it's worth noting, because of the actions of this legislature, because of the work of the State Patrol, because of the work of other law enforcement agencies, from 2023 to 2024, we saw a 10% decline in fatalities. The early data is showing that from 2024 to 2025, we've seen another 10% decline in fatalities. So we are moving the state back towards our vision of Target Zero. We need to continue on that pathway. Chair Fye and I agree that traffic safety is a priority, and we're going to continue to work on that this session. When it comes to the blood alcohol content limit, I've been on the record clearly and consistently across the last couple of years that we do need to move Washington State to the global norm, which is 0.05, and we're going to continue to work on that. We haven't yet gotten the bill through the Senate, so we're going to work on achieving that milestone hopefully this year. It is a priority. It is a huge step we could take to reduce those fatalities. But there are other things we can do as well. We've worked in a bipartisan way to make sure the State Patrol has adequate staffing. We're going to keep working on that. We've got to make sure that we get back on track towards Target Zero.
Jerry, I'll just have to say that you'll be seeing a bill that I've been working on with the Washington Trucking Association. I think Representative Barkas is going to co-sponsor this. They are willing to increase their fees in order to fund a trucking education program, because as we hear about too frequently, a lot of fatalities and a lot of collisions involve trucks, large trucks, and we need to make sure that we have a good education system for those truckers.
We'll debate that. Jerry, the .05, but I will say that we have done, and we are all committed to traffic safety. We have done some incredible things. I think we need to continue to increase the amount of troopers on the road. We just received a report that some of the work that we've done in the traffic safety cameras and work zones are producing results, and accidents are down, and the amount of speeding through those work zones throughout our state are down. This is keeping our workers safe, keeping our people on the road safe. So this is good data that we are doing, and this is work that we've done in a bipartisan way.
Senator King.
Thank you. This is where the good chair and I disagree. I am not in favor of .05. Other countries have done this. They have a whole lot of different things that they do that we don't do, and I think that's needs to be said. I think we need we need to get our state patrol, the numbers of our state patrol troopers increased to the level they're supposed to be at. That will do a substantial amount to reduce the number of deaths. But at this point, I don't think going to .05 would make that much of a difference at all.
Representative Fye, I want to start with you because you brought up an issue of the bill you're working with the Washington Trucking Association. There is an issue, the state is under fire for issuing hundreds of commercial driver's licenses to non-citizens who did not qualify for the licenses. It could even cost the state some federal highway funding. What will the legislature do in response to this? Is it more than hearings? Is there a bill?
I don't have a bill yet. I know that I presume that all four of us have been briefed on the circumstances that occurred. It's a problem in many, many states. It's not just the state of Washington. And it's the state of Washington, and I believe our numbers are actually quite a bit less than other states. And I know that I've been in regular contact and get updated on their fixes for the system, the way the system worked. It didn't provide a second look at the application. Was only done by one person, and so humans make mistakes, and they're working on correcting that. So I have every confidence that they will address it. If they need more resources for it, we'll provide it. And I think that it's good that this came up, because we need to follow the law, and I think the governor's office has been cooperating fully with the federal government on achieving the objectives that they're after.
I just want to provide one clarification, too, that the issue at hand was when those credentials expire. I have not seen any evidence that someone received a commercial driver's license that wasn't trained or entitled to. The question was, does their credential expire when their work authorization expires, or does it expire at some other date? So far, that is the issue. The people that have received commercial driver licenses have passed the training, have passed the tests, have passed the medical background checks. So the question is their credential expiring at the right time? And there have been errors in that. We're going to get on top of that. But I do think the public deserves to be assured that we weren't giving commercial driver's licenses to people that didn't receive the training. They did receive the training. It's just, when does their license expire? And that's important, but it is different than handing out credentials to people that weren't entitled to have them.
It sounds like then you see this as an agency response and not a legislative response either.
So far, I mean, I do think that the budget question is real. We need to make sure the agency has the adequate resources. And we've asked all our agencies to take reductions over the last couple of years. It's possible that these reductions have had an impact on these kind of workflows. If that's the case, we need to make sure they have the resources to do their job well and accurately.
I think there's a really good point, though, Jerry, to Senator Lewis's point. It's very different. The work that we do in doing the budget is really hard. And when we're sitting there getting the information from the agencies, we get the paper or whatever it is, and we're doing the appropriations. So it's really up to the agencies, like telling us what bridges need to be fixed, to if DOL needs more financing for making sure CDLs don't get messed up, right? So I don't remember a conversation, they've had reductions in their staffing, but it's due to a myriad of things. I don't remember ever anything coming in my tenure that said, hey, we need 20 more FTEs at X amount of dollars for CDL enforcement. Don't remember it. That being said, the agency has been very good on this issue. We have been briefed. We have been working with them. If there is some policy aspect that needs legislation, I'm sure that we will work together to make that happen.
Okay, well, I want to thank all four of you. This is your last warm-up before next week. And so, we look forward to having conversations and watching how this plays out. We're going to end this panel here, give a chance to change seats, and the next panel will be the chairs of the budget committees in each of the four caucuses.
Thanks, Jared. Thank job. See you next time. Great job.
You know what?